Hello everyone, it is the 11th of September 2020 and I'm just about to do an interview with Professor Richard Ennos from the University of Edinburgh. Now he contacted me a few days ago. He was at the rally in Edinburgh on the 5th of September, part of the Saving Scotland group. I know they've got a Facebook page, a new one that they're launching as well. And he sent me an interview. I know you were on the BBC Radio Scotland with John Beattie. And I listened to that interview. It was good that they had you on, but I didn't feel that they really treated you with a great deal of respect. And I think this is one of the major issues that we've got at the moment in dealing with this crisis, is that lack of balance when it comes to the media, maybe media brands that we've trusted in the past. And I've spoken about this a lot, but I think it's incredibly serious. It's never been more serious at this stage, 6 months on, when we are seeing these measures such as reduction in the number of people that can meet down to 6, from 30 down to 6. You know, school children were having to wear masks in communal areas, and some schools all day over the age of 11. Lots of separate issues going on at the moment at this stage, 6 months on, when it looks like the deaths have really, really dropped. So when you turn on the BBC radio, especially for maybe a certain generation, for them it's their only source of news. You know, you want to kind of get a full reflection and understanding and picture of what is actually happening here around the world when it comes to the impact of the pandemic and the restrictions around coronavirus and the lockdown, the impact it's having on the public, but also what conversations are going on amongst scientists. You know, what is the real picture? So after you did that interview, which I'll put a link to, Richard, on this post, the presenter for BBC, John Beattie, played a clip from Jason Leach. Now, Jason Leach, for anyone that doesn't know, is the National Clinical Director for the Scottish Government. And they played a clip with him straight after your interview. I know you were called, he almost compared you to he mentioned flat earth scientists, didn't he? And he said you're not following the established science. And then kind of talked about conspiratorial elements of what you might be saying, because it was an anti-government stance. And then played this clip from Jason Leach, where Jason Leach said about the protest in Scotland on the 5th of September, I just don't understand, he said. It doesn't make any sense to me, these people protesting. He seems so disconnected from that sentiment. I was quite shocked by that. And I think if you're in government, or if you're in a position of responsibility like that, such as a National Clinical Director, you need to be on the pulse of public opinion. And from what I've seen, certainly across the UK, with 40,000 members of Stand Up X, 20,000 in Keep Britain Free, 20,000 in Save Our Rights UK, I don't know how he could be saying that straight after your interview, that it doesn't make any sense. And to be so disconnected from that public mood, which I think is very, very strong and growing. And I see it on comments, on posts all over social media. But he said, you know, don't these people protesting in Scotland understand? There have been 910, according to the figures I've just looked at, there's 28 million cases worldwide, 19 million have recovered, but there's been 910,000 deaths. He said, don't these people protesting realise the risk of this virus? So I've had a chance to bring you on, and I'm very, very grateful that you come onto the channel so we can have a talk about some of these issues. Did you feel, first of all, that the BBC interview that you did was balanced? Were you pleased with it?
I was pleased in one way because I've seen so many interviews in which people get interrupted halfway through and they're not able to explain their points. So I was pleased that I was able to get across the points that I wanted to get across. I was not pleased by the way I was treated. I mean, okay, one expects to be challenged, but I do expect that somebody who has had a scientific career and knows what they're talking about should be given the respect that's due them, and that their case should be heard, and they shouldn't be just thought of as a flat earther.
Wrong language. The wrong language, wasn't it?
I've had experience. The first time I ever spoke, I went along to a meeting which was of concerned people, which was in April, and it was at Holyrood Park, and it had already been smeared by the Scottish government. The First Minister had said that people shouldn't go along, it would just be a load of anti-vaxxers, etc., etc. Anyway, I went along and I had to speak because there was no one else there to speak. And I said my piece. And I was critical of the BBC at that time. There was a BBC reporter there. They came up to me afterwards and they said, I'm sorry, I work for the BBC, and I need to keep my job. I can't report what you've just said. I've been sent along here to get pictures of you not socially distancing so that we can smear you. And if it goes any further above what I've above that, I won't get my report through. So that's one of my experiences so far.
Wow, I wasn't expecting you to tell that story. So this person, did they tell you this off the record, so you can't reveal who they are?
No, I can't reveal who they are. No, that's off the record. And I guess I don't want to damage their career. But that's the level of, that's why I haven't got any trust in the BBC, because that's the kind of thing that's happened. We've also got a group which meets on the Meadows, and we've been smeared twice by, this wasn't the BBC, but it's Edinburgh Live, and they managed to get some quotes from MSP saying how terrible we are. No one had actually come of these MSPs. They hadn't come to talk to us at all. We'd just been smeared as anti-vaxxers. So it's extremely difficult to get any kind of a message out if you have concerns about government policy.
This is overwhelming for me to hear all of this, Richard. I didn't know that that story you just told about what the BBC reporter said to you. I've got somebody who works in the BBC, and I talk to them on a regular basis, and they have told me the same story, that there's certain things they're just not allowed to get through. And, there's the journalist level, and then there's the editors and what's actually able to be published. And never has it been for me or looked more sinister, I have to say. I know that Dr. Ron Daniels from Sepsis UK was doing an interview on Sky News, and Mark Austin, it was the end of the Sky News hour, and he asked Dr. Ron Daniels, a very highly respected doctor who's been on Sky News loads and loads of times. He said, do you think there'll be a second wave? And Dr. Ron Daniels started to say, no, I don't think there will be a second wave. But Mark Austin interrupted him and wouldn't let him finish. And I watched that very, very carefully, and I was watching it live on the telly, and it was blatantly obvious that he was told by someone in the gallery to interrupt and stop him. I could see it, because they then went to a really, really long graphic loop at the end. And having worked in television, I know how these things work. So if it's happening at Sky as well, and other publications, and it seems to be the media organisations that have been around for some time. And, it's very difficult for, I think, people to accept. And I don't want to talk about the media or bang on about the media, but it's so important. I see a direct correlation at the moment between the media sources you trust and your position on the virus and your future health. I think when it comes to masks or when it comes to vaccines, the information source you trust is going to dictate what you do. So I think without talking about the media, we can't really move forward with this debate. So that's why I'm kind of focused on the media a little bit more. But these organizations, these media publications, they have to have some kind of funding. I mean, I'm getting money from Patreon, which is just about keeping me going. I'm earning a lot less than I was before, because I just am so devoted and passionate to a future that has a freedom and choice and a democracy for my children, and I want them to be happy. So, my funding, I'm not getting a call from the government for 100 grand a year or whatever to put certain messages out on my channel, but I know there are news publications that are doing that, unfortunately, because that's how they have to pay the wages. That's how they keep going. But it's very interesting to hear that you've also experienced somebody from within the BBC reveal that to you, that they're not comfortable, that they've been told to smear you and call you anti-vaxxers, COVID deniers, conspiracy cranks. These are the kind of things that we're hearing. And it's very troubling for me, having worked as a journalist for these institutions, BBC, ITV, to see this actually happening. But there are good journalists in the BBC, and I think we've really got to encourage them to protest, perhaps possibly within the organisation. So what's the solution when it comes to the media, do you think? And had you had any experience of the media before? Have you been in the spotlight before now? Is this the first time you've kind of got involved?
No, it's the first time I've got involved. I mean, we've had press releases for some of the research work that I've done, but nothing else. No, I've only been drawn to this because it's so vital to, in my case, save Scotland, because we're in a really, really dark place at the moment. And I'm sticking my head above the parapet. because people trust me to to help them, and I feel I can help them if I can get out the right message. And I guess the message I wanted to get out to people is not the message that's coming from the mainstream media. The two messages I wanted to get out are that we have very little to fear from the virus SARS-CoV-2, and I can provide all the data, and we've actually got plenty of data to convince of that fact, and it all comes from reputable sources, National Record of Scotland in our case. And the second message that I wanted to get out is that people have got to change their mind about the government. We've had a government in place probably 50 years or so, and it's been a democratic government. Hasn't been perfect, but in large part, people have been able to change government policy if it's been wrong. There's a democratic processes have kicked in. At the moment, the government has been given enormous powers under this Coronavirus 2020 Act. And if you want to retain a democracy, it's up to you to police that. It's eternal vigilance is absolutely necessary. And that vigilance should be coming in from the media, and it should be coming in from the general public. It's not coming in from the media at the moment at all. There is no counter argument to whatever the government puts in. Then we still get very few people being able to express an opinion which is against what the government has put in. And what we need to do is to have a look at what's the actually government's been given these enormous powers. Have they used them appropriately? And have we got in place a government which cares for its people? And I can give you a number of instances why I don't believe that's the case. So and I think everyone needs to think about the government's actions, and think not just about themselves, about whether it's good for me, but think about the whole of the community, the whole of the UK. Is it good for the whole of the UK? And there are a number of different areas in which there are problems. One of them is the way in which the government is introducing new rules by diktat, and the weapon that they use for imposing these is fear. And they have deliberately employed people, psychologists, to develop a propaganda campaign of fear. And that's been propagated by the mainstream media, and BBC has been absolutely complicit in this. And I could just quote a few headlines in the BBC. So a report on COVID-19 as dangerous as Ebola. Okay, that's a headline on one of the BBC reports, and it completely biased reporting, and very little reporting about good stories. I mean, there have been good stories. People have found out how you can treat COVID-19. Good stories. No children are affected by COVID-19. Good stories. 80% of people are asymptomatic. Good stories. 99.7% at least of people survive having been infected from COVID-19. Okay, these are all great things. The other thing that they're reporting on is cases. Now we've come to the end of the epidemic. There are hardly any people dying anymore of COVID-19. So what they've done now is they've gone out and used a test, a PCR test, to find so-called cases. And these cases aren't necessarily, and I think people have agreed that about 90% of them aren't, people who are actually infected and are shedding the virus. They're people who've got bits of the virus lying around. They've managed to get rid of the virus. There's still bits of the virus left around. This PCR test picks up bits of dead virus. And actually, Jason Leach, who you mentioned earlier, he actually has admitted that the PCR tests that we've got for determining cases are a bit rubbish. That's his quote. That's a quote from him. So they're putting these cases forward as if these are really sick people. They're not. They're asymptomatic people. They don't even know they've got the disease. And trying to scaremonger all over again to try and develop the narrative of a second wave for which there's absolutely no evidence here or in Europe anywhere. So it's just a program of fear. And when people are fearful of something, they can't think straight. And it's a very good way of controlling people. And this fear has been used to control people. So that's one thing about government policy, which I think should make you critical of whether or not we've got a caring government in place.
Well, absolutely, yeah. And I think the public need to be scared, but not of the virus. They need to be scared of a breakdown of civil society where there's no trust in the media or government. A destabilization, if we look at America, a future that's full of happiness and enthusiasm, where we believe that our government cares about us, like you say.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, there are a number of other cases where we could say, look at the actions of the government and ask the question, is this a caring government? So we could look at what happened with care homes. Actually, before the lockdown came in place, I heard about that lockdown was going to come in place. I wrote a paper and I sent it to the Scottish government. And I said, we already know, and this was in March, I already know that this virus preferentially affects older people, but it's not serious for young people. So the policy that we should institute is, okay, look after, shelter those people who are vulnerable. And we know that they're the old people who've got comorbidities. And the rest of the people we should allow to get on with their lives. The virus will spread among them. It won't be a very serious one. And we'll get immunity. And then we can bring out our people who are sheltered. So I sent that to the Scottish government, and I got a reply back a month later, and it said, save the NHS, stay at home, save lives. And that's all it said. And what the Scottish government did actually was they took people who were in the hospitals and they took them out of the hospital and they put them into their care homes. So these are old people put into care homes. At first they admitted they only did 300, but later on, when pressed, they had to admit they did 900. And they knew, they had actually tested some of these people. They knew these people were already positive for COVID-19. And they sent them into those care homes. And of course, there was a massive death. And about half of the deaths that have occurred in Scotland are due to that policy. Now,
well, yeah, 1,800 isn't there deaths, and 1,000 of them are from that policy. Is that right, roughly?
Something like that. I can't remember the exact figures, but it's extremely high. And many of those people died without the comfort of their loved ones, and the care home staff also became sick, and they couldn't provide sufficient care. And many of those people died of starvation and of dehydration. They were, many of them, Alzheimer's patients. So I think that was extremely cruel. So that's one policy which I think
shows they don't care.
Again, ask, have we got a caring government? The third thing, another thing we could think about. Okay, we've got people in hospital at the moment. They've got cancer. They've got other problems. They're needing treatment. They're needing operations and things. An awful lot of that has been shut down. Cancer treatments, I've got personal friends who are undergoing cancer treatment. It's been stopped. And that's going to shorten their lives for certain. It's going to kill people much earlier than they would have. They will die much earlier than they would have done earlier because those treatments have been stopped. And we also know that because of this fear, people did not actually go into hospital when they should have done. And we've got many, many excess deaths. More excess deaths if you add them all up as a consequence of people dying in their homes than dying of COVID. So because they didn't go to get treated. So I think the way in which the NHS has been shut down sort of begs the question: have we got a caring government? I mean, we pay for this. We don't pay to save the NHS. We pay to get treatment at the NHS. We haven't received that. And the last category, I think, are really we should be looking after when we have these enormous powers to help us in a health crisis, is the innocent people in our community, and particularly children. And what have we done with the children? Well, we've used these powers to shut down their schooling. And when we brought back up their schooling, we brought back, in Scotland, they wanted to bring back half-time schooling. and they didn't give them any exams. And when they marked the exams, they didn't mark them on the basis of the merit of the students. They marked them on the basis of their postcode, so that people from disadvantaged areas were doubly disadvantaged. I don't consider that to be something which is a caring government. And then we have people locked away, children locked away, no one to protect them from abuse at home. And I'm sure that a lot of that has gone on. And what are we doing with fiddling with their minds? I had a wonderful childhood. I love to see innocence in children, and that's been destroyed by these all the things that have been brought into schools, taking away their innocence and their joy, and I just find it terrible. I cannot believe that I have a caring government that does things like that to children. Children are as precious.
I agree.
They're the most precious things in our society. We should look after them.
Yeah, I knew children would suffer. It's just obvious that children were really going to suffer, and there's no PR agency for children that's saying we are lonely, we are scared, we are being abused, we aren't being protected, we aren't being looked after, and we're certainly not being put first.
Yeah, I mean, well, you want to bring up children in an atmosphere of love, and you don't want to bring them up in an atmosphere of fear. And what we're doing at the moment is we're instilling fear in those children, and mistrust of others, seeing other people as merely carriers of a disease rather than purveyors of love. And that's absolutely disgusting. And where is it all leading? I mean, what we're hearing now from the government is they want to test us every single day with a test which they've admitted is rubbish, and keep up that level of fear. So introduce a test so that we can't kind of go out, we can't do anything, we can't participate in society. And what they'd like, it would seem to be, they're hinting at, is that we need to have some sort of passport to prove that we're healthy. And only then can we actually participate in life and participate in all of the social activities which make life worth living. And there's hints that what they'd like to do is inject us with a cocktail of chemicals which haven't been properly tested in order to enable us to join this society and take part in this society where we would be able to have social interactions and so on. And they're also very keen on getting as much information as they have about us and monitoring us as much as possible. And I think that's actually an incredibly frightening prospect.
Well, this has been said so many times by people from similar backgrounds to yourself, but I really think the change that could come, there's something that's positive, is, going back to what you were talking about with the BBC, I have seen a few articles that are positive, not many, and it's certainly not headlines, but I know there are some good journalists, and I would, in all these different media organisations, and they have children and they're empathic and they care, and they don't just care about their own and their own reputation and paying the mortgage, they do care about other people. And I say to them, fight this, get together within your organisations and try and do something about it from within. And the same with politicians as well, if you feel this way. And I really do detect with you, and a lot of people I've spoken to, it's a really heavy heart. And I'm sure you're in a similar position to me where you get emails every day from members of the public who are really, really, really suffering. I hear from people that have lost their jobs. I've got mental health.
Yeah, I haven't said anything about the economic situation. I mean, I really feel for people who are performing in the arts, because what makes Britain brilliant, fantastic place, is the arts and culture. That's just been removed from us, and those people have lost their jobs just like that, and they can't do anything to get them back. That's one of the most tragic things that happened.
It feels like we're being suffocated. We're being all the oxygen
Yes.
being taken out of society,
Yeah.
and all of the beauty and all of the things that we have so fought so hard for. We're so proud of everything that's kind of courageous and creative is being very slowly, insidiously destroyed.
Yeah.
But there is still a glimmer of hope speaking to people like yourself. And, there is others that I'm aware of, Denise Welsh, the celebrity, Matt Letitia, we've got Simon Dolan. These are people who care, and they have put their reputations on the line. I'm earning a lot less money now. I have given my platform away. I just want to mention this Priest Media Opinions channel that we've got. I've launched about a week ago, where people can go and share their views, Richard. I think it's important people are aware of that. So on there, we've got Canon and OBE from the Church of England. We've got an IT engineer, a police volunteer, ex-civil servant, a supply teacher, all putting forward their views, because I think a lot of people are feeling exactly like you're feeling, but they are too scared, too embarrassed.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with masks. They don't want to wear a mask because it causes extreme distress. They don't think it's safe. They don't think the science supports it, but they don't want to stand out and be different. How much is your reputation on the line? And this is such an important point, reputation. And then the smearing you get and the attacks that you get, and I've suffered from them. I've had Dom Jolly and BBC's Mike Wendling and Peter Jukes from another publication. Every day I don't know where the attack's going to come from, and I'm sure it's happened to you as well. It's not good, is it?
Yeah, well, I'm okay. I'm retired. I can do what I can say what I like. I guess I'm in a privileged position, and that's why I'm doing it. And maybe I wouldn't if I still had my job. And but I do feel I do feel extremely strongly about this. It makes one feel that actually the society that's being put in front of you is not something that I want to be part of at all. I want to create a different society, one that's founded on love and trust, not one that's founded on fear and mistrust of everyone else in society. That's not the way I want things to go, and that's not the way I want my children and grandchildren. That's not the kind of society I want to have for my children and my grandchildren. That's just a nightmare. So there are obviously people are developing alternative things. So there's going to be alternative media, and we have potentially a very great power, but it's not being utilized at the moment. And that's because people are still in fear. And if we could detach them from the mainstream media, we might have much more of a chance. Or if mainstream media were much better at telling the facts as they really are, then people will be able to snap out of this, but they aren't at the moment.
Balance. What's missing is a debate. Having somebody like yourself and having the opposite view have a debate. I haven't seen a lot of that. There's not a counter narrative. I did interview GP Ricochet. He used to work for the BBC. He said, I'm not seeing a counter narrative, and we're not. Like you said at the beginning of this interview, someone from the BBC actually said, I was told to come here and to smear you, to not listen to you. And, relationships of trust break down, and they're so important. So I agree, the whole situation. Mainstream media, you talk about mainstream media. Well, I have now got 15,000 followers on Facebook. I've got 43,000 on YouTube. I've got 53,000 on Twitter. And I'm reaching more people with more control and more independence than when I was working at the BBC and ITV. And I'm saying that because if there are any journalists out there listening, you can build your own profile now on new media. Don't call it social media, but you can. And it's all about making sure that you listen to the people and build up trust, and that you're honest. And, sometimes you get things wrong and make mistakes, but there is a new type of media that can be born out of this. And I also think there's a new type of politics as well. And a lot of people really don't look at Boris Johnson and think that he cares. And I don't really. He doesn't strike me as someone, when he speaks, that has a lot of empathy, that has a lot of compassion and empathy and care. When they reported his latest child, they didn't even know how many kids he has got. He doesn't care about his own children. I always look at that. What was your upbringing? My dad really brought me up to look after people. That was a strong message, to be compassionate and selfless. And he did that for me. And my children are the most important thing in the world to me. So I'd like to see a leader really with those kind of principles and ethics. And I've got a feeling, Richard. You've had a similar upbringing and probably have a similar outlook on life.
Yeah.
Some things are important.
I was brought up in an atmosphere of love, and that's terrific. And yeah, my parents, you know, whatever I did, they supported me, and that's terrific. You know, that's the way things should be.
Let's look at the end of this interview then to something really hopeful and positive, that people like yourself with this, you know, that have had a loving, empathic background come into these positions within corporations and the government and the media, as it tends to be the ones that are kind of narcissists, doesn't it? It doesn't tend to be the empathic ones that lead the country. But I know that there are people out there that care, and I know that there are people out there that can rise up and form political groups, media groups, and really make a difference. Is there anything else that you would like to add before we finish the conversation?
Well, yeah, I think I probably appeal to two groups of people who could really make a difference. One group of people, as you say, is the journalists, and if they could come out and say how they have been influenced, why they kind of explain why they're only giving one side of the story, and the kind of pressures that they're under to do that, that would be extremely helpful to everybody, so that they understood that. And the second thing would be to appeal to the medical fraternity. There must be many people in the medical fraternity who went into medicine because they wanted to help people. And they can see that the NHS at the moment has been, to a large extent, shut down. And the patients who they should be treating are in physical pain. Many of them, they're going to die earlier. They must be the medics must be in absolute anguish. And there have been some few brave nurses, a few brave doctors who stood up and said what's going on. But if more of those people could do so, it would be so helpful to the rest of the population, and they would snap out of it, help them to snap out of this, and they help them to start questioning what's going on and the government actions. And so those are kind of two groups of people who I think, if we could encourage a few more people, I know it's extremely difficult because you may well lose your job, but think of all the other people in the nation and how much you're helping them. And those people who are questioning the government, I just ask them to give their support and their love to those people who are standing up, because it makes so much of a difference. You can make contact with other people who are of a like mind, and you can get support from them. And there's an awful lot of love and support in that community of people who see the damage that's been done at the moment. And if we can bring those people together then and build a strong movement, then I think that's really important.
I think it's a wonderful, potentially a really wonderful moment in history where we can create that change and correct things and put them on a very much more positive path for the future. You talk about those in the medical profession and the media profession. Well, we've got two here, haven't we? We've got me and you. Let's hope we will help people to be strong, and we've inspired them to do something about this situation. And the Facebook groups that you belong to in Scotland, we'll make sure that we put those links with this interview. So thank you so much for this interview.
Very welcome.
I found it very emotional. It's a draining time, and I wasn't expecting this, but you were, you know, this moment in time's happened, and you've stood up and you've said something, you've done something, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to say my bit. That's been very good. Thank you.
You're most welcome. You take care. Keep in touch.
Okay.
Bye.